Welcome to the Even Better podcast, where your host, Sinikka Waugh of Your Clear Next Step, brings you exciting content about making communities better by helping people get even better at work.
Welcome to today's episode of the Even Better podcast. My name is Sinikka Waugh, and I am welcoming you today to today's episode. This is part of our ongoing mission at Your Clear Next Step to help us all have even better work days. I am so delighted today to welcome on our edition. This is my dear friend, Jodi Rhone, and my dear friend, Andy Haining-Brown. Thank you so much for joining us today.
We're happy to be here.
This is so great. So we have two people who inspire me, and I am just so thrilled to have these two guests. I have known Jodi and Andy longer than any of us are going to confess out loud. And we have been friends and colleagues, and I have just delighted in their professionalism and delighted in their career journeys. We've known each other back from the days when we were all business analysts, and now they have created the Canary Consulting Group, and they are strategic planners in this really unique and cool way. And I will let them tell you about what they do, but it's really, really cool. And it's really unique, and they help people in this exciting way here in Central Iowa. And they're going to talk about values today. And as we talk about values in this episode, we're going to talk about why values are fundamental to your success. Whether you're an individual, whether you're a business owner, whether you're working day to day in what you're doing, values matter to a better workday. And Jodi and Andy have figured out some really cool success to having better workdays, and they do it. They have better workdays together, and they have better workdays helping others have better workdays. And it's really, really magical. So Jodi and Andy, tell us a little bit about you and your story and your business.
Absolutely. Andy and I met years ago on a business consulting kind of project. I worked in IT space for a number of years. Andy did as well. And we met on an HR project about 15 years ago. And as time went on, we said we love smaller organizations. And so we knew that we wanted to have impact locally here in Central Iowa. So we formed Canary Consulting Group with just a goal of helping small to mid-sized businesses be successful, particularly around strategy and growth. And then our niche sort of picked us.
Yes. So these days we work primarily with nonprofits, but we do spend a little bit of time with entrepreneurs as well.
Absolutely. And so for nonprofits, we offer a variety of services. Strategic planning is one of those. Andy and I are operations people by trade, so we spend a lot of time working on organizational effectiveness and ways to scale better and work better together. We do a lot of work around nonprofit mergers and partnerships because nonprofits are always looking for ways to do more together. And one of the other things that we typically do is vision, mission, and values work, either for organizations as they launch or for those that just need a refresh.
When I think about the experiences that I had working with both of you at separate times, I worked with you individually in different spaces. And the thing that I knew in our past, because I was a consultant when I encountered each of you separately. And the thing that I remember that stuck out about each of you individually is that in my mind, both of you stuck out to me as someone that I had cherry picked in my head as someone I wanted to work with. So each of you were someone that I said to myself, if I ever go and put together a dream team of people that I want to work with, you're both on my team. So individually, you weren't working together at the time, but you were both individually on the dream team. And here you are. You're the dream team. You found each other. You wound up working together. And I just think anyone would be so lucky, so fortunate to have the chance to work together. And you bring different things to the table. You are not the same person. You don't look at the world the same way, the two of you.
No,
right?
That's actually a super nice compliment, because I think about professional me 15 to 18 years ago when we first met. And I was kind of a nightmare back then when I think about it. It's funny how much we change in that amount of time.
Absolutely.
But yeah, we definitely do look at things differently. And I have to say, I'm really glad that I get to do it with a friend and a partner, not by myself. Yeah, I think that sort of brings us to the first reason.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So you've said something like lead in. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what we wanted to share is, first of all, an understanding of what values are. I think sometimes organizations struggle with that a little bit and struggle to define what their values are. And so we see values as really the DNA of your organization. They are the non-negotiable ways of behaving. It's who you are as an organization. And because of that, you don't determine your values. You don't pick them from a laundry list of really good values and say, well, I like these three, and so they will be ours. Instead, you're discovering how you already behave and what's already important to you.
When I encounter both of you, though, when I think about it, your values aren't just something that you put on a wall, right? It's not trite, and it's not an exercise that you do and that you just set aside. It's why I like that word lead. Like it's part of what you lead with, you lead in the room with, you show up with. It's part of your fiber. It's who you are, not just an exercise, right?
Yeah, I think what's important, the most important thing I could leave somebody with related to values is how they actually show up, and it's through behaviors, right? So that's where you see values in action if you're using them and not treating them as an exercise, is both in how you behave and how you expect others to behave and engage within the organization. And that's why I think they're so powerful, is they start to set the bar for what we expect of one another. The other thing I would say about them too, and I'm sure we'll earn maybe not enemies, but some growling from people about saying this, but neither Jodi nor I love when values are table stakes.
Right. We also feel like they shouldn't be aspirational. So they aren't a laundry list of things you want to be, but your values need to be a real reflection of who you are. And so what we find is that when we go through the exercise with folks and they're really struggling to come up with it, that's not the right set of values yet.
Right. And I'm going to dwell on this. I'm going to hang out here just somewhere because there are two sort of opposing sort of boundaries on this. That one of them, and you hit on it, is it's not aspirational. I think I heard Andy Andrews say once that you can't call yourself a winning football team if you haven't won the last 40 games, right? It's not aspirational. It's not who you want to be. And then the other side of the boundary is, even as a person, it doesn't have to even be as an organization, but as a person, I think I heard Simon Sinek talking recently about, go ask your friends, go ask the people who know you the best, what words they would use to describe you, how they describe you, and the words and the descriptions that keep coming up, your very closest friends, your very best friends, what are the words they use? Because how you keep showing up, that's you. That's the way you keep showing up, and it's the how you really are. And that, in fact, when I think about why I had cherry picked the two of you in particular all those years ago, is because consistently, over and over and over in all of our encounters, you showed up as who you authentically are. That's how you are. You said, no, this is who I am, and this is how I show up. And you were that way every single encounter. And it's just so lovely. So thank you for doing that.
You bet. I'm not sure at the time we knew that we were doing that, but
but you've done it for years.
2020.
Yes. Okay. So let's get into these 4 ways. So you've got 4 practical, tactical ways that these things matters, and reasons values are so fundamental to your success. One of them is it's how you choose your partners. So let's talk into that.
So when we launched, we had, again, you hit on this a lot. We've known each other a really long time. So we knew the Venn diagram of what we believe is right in the world and how we operate overlapped quite a bit. But we did think it was important, when we decided that we were going to spend all day, every day working together and building a business together, that we practice what we preach a little bit and bring in a third party that we trusted to actually guide us through the process of discovering our own values. And so we did that, and Jodi can talk a little bit more about how we approach that.
Absolutely. And so this is obviously work we do for other companies, but one of the reasons we wanted to rely on someone working us through this exercise is we wanted to be participants in this journey, not facilitators. And so it was really important for us. We went through a process of just naming things that we knew to be true about us. And we made list after list after list of words that we felt like captured us, and then started to group those into categories. Oftentimes, 5 or 6 or 8 words really got down to the same thing at its core. And so, that was how we were able to start to say what feels real and what feels right. And so we ended up with a list of values that we felt like really, really captured us. The first one being curiosity. We, by nature, can't stop asking questions. And so that is really, really, really important to us. And I'll give a story too about a vendor that had it was someone that reached out to us and was interested in being a Canary Consulting Group consultant. And we spent about an hour and a half with this person, and they were lovely and delightful and fabulous experience. But at the end of an hour and a half, they'd never asked us a single question. And since we, by nature, are curious people and we appreciate curiosity, we knew that that was not a good cultural fit. So in terms of choosing partners, that was one that, despite the great level of skill and excellence, was never going to be a right fit for us.
Yeah, the second one that fit us was relatable. And that, Sinikka, you talked a little bit about asking a friend. That's a thing I would say when we ask for feedback from our clients that we routinely hear is you're really easy to engage with. You meet us where we're at. We built rapport quickly, and I felt like I could, show you all the skeletons in our closets, which is really important with the work that we do.
Absolutely. The next one is candid, because you will get our honest opinion. We will do so gently when the occasion calls for it, or directly in some cases. But we understand that in our work as consultants with nonprofits, they want to hear the reality of what they need to do to continue to grow and to deliver their services in a way that's really impactful in the community. And so we really strive to always just tell the truth.
Our next one was practical, and that's really, really important to us. So we grew up working with larger organizations. That, with the small clients that we tend to work with, is problematic if we approach that work that way. So we've been very purposeful about delivering practical solutions for them that they're able to maintain and live with without us needing to be there all the time.
Yeah, and that ties itself into kind of the last one, which is flexible. We really care about meeting the needs of the organizations we serve. That is not facilitated well by coming in with a rigid plan that says, here's how you will have to go about this. We really feel super strongly that, we need to flex. And so if you're a small nonprofit with 3 employees, that's going to be a very different approach than an organization of 200 employees. And so we pride ourselves in being able to take those practical tools and really apply them in whatever manner is appropriate for the organization and being flexible to meet their needs. And so those were the values we laid.
You bet.
I think it's really important, one of the traps that we can fall into of believing that our values are the right values for everybody. And so I think a powerful thing when you're using your values to choose partners is to recognize that unalike isn't bad. It's just different and might not be a good fit. And I think the example Jodi shared about the potential consultant that we chatted with is really powerful, because that's somebody I would refer work to.
Yeah, that alignment in values is a really important consideration for us. We won't blindly recommend someone or blindly add someone to our team unless we've seen them in action and feel really comfortable that they are just directionally aligned with our values as well.
Absolutely. So when you're thinking about the application of this, thinking about our listeners here, who are, some of them are business owners, some of them are working in the corporate halls all over the place, right? Some of them are thinking about maybe starting their own thing. Some of them are spending their days right now separating from the corporate grind. But this idea of knowing your own values, what your values are, and knowing that choosing partners, whether that partner is a business partner or a friend or a colleague or a teammate, or perhaps you're a hiring manager, choosing that partner, how we choose each other, we're still looking for that alignment around values, either how we spend our time as friends, our friend group value, or the values of our team or the values of our organization. That value alignment, if we can't articulate what those values are, then we're going to really struggle to find that alignment. And Andy, I just really love your clarification there, that if we're not aligned on values, it doesn't mean different is bad. It just means that different is going to be misaligned if we're trying to seek alignment on those values.
Yeah, I think the other thing that's interesting, especially in the business world. So I think all of us probably have an example from our personal life where we think of someone that we've left behind at some point and moved on from. And if you think back to why that happened, you can probably map it to a value that wasn't shared. I think one of the things that's important when we look at partners in the business world is really understanding what the partnership is for, right? So like Jodi's in my partnership is a pretty permanent, pretty robust partnership where we're spending a lot of time together. But a third party consultant that we bring in, maybe we care most that they share our value of curiosity because we want them to really get at root cause of problems and deliver things that work well for a client. But we care less about some of those other things.
Right. Okay. So let's keep going here. How else? 4 reasons that values are fundamental to your success. So how to choose partners is the first one. How to build your team. Let's go there.
Yeah, this one's an interesting one because I think so thinking about the listeners again, this is important if you're building a team. It's also important if you're looking to become part of somebody else's team. So individuals can use this too. I spent a chunk of my career in recruiting. And one of the things that really surprised me when I was conducting interviews with people is how frequently they did not ask any questions to assess whether the company was actually a good fit for them personally when it comes to what they value. And that is something I would encourage everybody who is looking at joining another organization or team or building a partnership to do. So treat that as a two-way conversation. I think on the hiring leader or hiring organization side, I think getting really clear on what things you can ask that start to get at whether or not the person you're interviewing or looking to have join your team shares your values is really important. And that prep goes a long way because typically if you take each of your values and think about that, those questions are useful sort of regardless of the role that you're hiring for.
Yeah, so we spend a lot of time coaching leaders to really refine those questions to get at the heart of what they're looking for as an employee. Because it's interesting to us that oftentimes we'll work with a leader who says, oh, I have underperformers on my team. They're just not a good fit. Like their personality just doesn't work for our team and it's a struggle. And then we'll say, well, how did that come about? Was that somebody that was with your organization as you joined? And they'll say, no, I hired all of them. Well, that's a symptom of just not being able to dive in. You're probably asking great technical questions about people's skill and ability, but that's only half the equation.
I think that's a good point. So one of the things that Jodi and I end up doing typically with clients we've already worked with in some other aspect is a lot of times we'll stay on and continue to act sort of as a guide for a leader. And it's interesting. And I think all of us that have been in the workforce very long can recognize this example. Somebody who delivers amazing results, but leaves like a wake of bodies and destroyed relationships behind them. That is a classic example of where you've hired somebody amazing from a delivery and technical skill perspective, but it just does not fit your culture in any way whatsoever.
Right. And if you tolerate that kind of behavior, what inadvertently happens is you lose your best employees who were those bodies.
Or other people start behaving that way.
I think another piece is really holding people accountable to performance standards. We spend a lot of time doing some supportive work in terms of performance improvement plans and also just a performance cycle over the course of a year. And so helping people kind of build out what their review process might look like, their periodic touch bases with their employees. And I think if we overlook an opportunity when we focus the nature of that conversation around technical ability and aptitude and capacity to do the job well. So we always encourage organizations to include values as a really important part of the review process.
Yep, I would say on top of that, the best organizations that we interact with regularly talk about values in action. And that sounds like, oh gosh, that's a lot to remember if I'm having team meetings or bringing my group of coworkers together, but it doesn't have to be. It really, in some organizations we've worked with, looks like 5 minutes at the beginning of a team meeting where somebody shares an example of where another team member really demonstrated one of the organization's values.
Yeah, I sit on a board where that is a recurring part of the meeting every single session. And so one of the employees will usually walk in and tell us about their favorite value or something that's important to them or something that they saw demonstrated. And that honestly gives me a lot of like warm feelings for that organization, because if that's happening at that level, it's also happening in the course of team meetings and day-to-day conversations.
Just yesterday, we had our first quarter state of the company address at your Clear Next Step. And as our introductions for all the people who were on the virtual meeting, there it was introduce yourself, who are you, and what role do you play in the organization, and then highlight how you saw one of our core values show up in the last quarter. Like,
yep, absolutely.
Celebrate. Yeah. So it was everyone's sort of favorite part of the meeting, was getting to share that and see the results of it. You could just see it on their faces. It was really fun. Yeah. So using those values to build your team, to measure the team. And when you say build your team, I love this phrase, build the team. It's not just bring the people together, but it's building that team dynamic, building the team's accountability, building the strengths, building the performance out of the team, building the team depth, building the bench strength they're in. It's not just getting people together. It's literally building that team. And
absolutely
love it. Okay, so I'm going to pause right here. If you are listening to this podcast and you just jumped in, you need to just stop a little and rewind, because you've missed some good stuff here. And we are on here with Andy Haining-Brown and Jodi Rhone with Canary Consulting. And we are talking about 4 reasons that values are fundamental to your success. And we've talked about how to choose partners and how to build your team. And we're going to jump into the third point, which is how to choose your clients.
This one's my favorite, because you actually do get to choose your clients.
Yes. Sometimes people are like, I don't know, someone showed up and they want us to do work, and so we have to. And that's not true.
And what's interesting, I think, about this one is that it can be easy to be dismissive of this one and say, well, yeah, because you're a small shop and consultants, it's easy to do this. But big organizations recognize that this is important too. And they do this typically through an exercise where they define their ideal client. And when they do that, you'll find that if it's done well, values start to creep into that conversation, because there's the recognition we can't be everything to everyone.
Absolutely. We have a hilarious method of determining whether or not we're excited about a piece of business. When new inquiries land in our inbox, we find that if we haven't talked about them by the end of the day, neither one of us are interested in the work. Because inevitably, when it seems like something that's a perfect fit for us, we're so excited. We're like, oh, did you see that come in? That sounds so cool. Let's go talk to them. If we haven't done that, that is our signal that we are pushing it off now. And if we're doing it now when we don't know too much, we will certainly be doing that then.
We had one that we didn't talk about for a few days, but against our better judgment, we went ahead and met with this organization. It was really interesting, much like the consultant example we shared earlier. I think we were there maybe an hour and a half, and not one question was asked of us about how we would approach the work that we were talking about, what our backgrounds were, what we value, like literally nothing.
Right. And the reason that against our better judgment we had responded to this is because it was one of the highest profile community partners in the nonprofit space that would have been an amazing story in terms of our own credibility. And so it was very tempting to go ahead and say yes.
Yeah, and this is a great example of where different isn't necessarily bad, it's just different. And I think we recognize that for this piece of work, it was well structured already. They clearly had a way that they wanted to have it, and there wasn't a lot of wiggle room for us to demonstrate our values, right? So not a lot of time for us to ask questions, not a lot of time for us to practice being flexible with the solution to make sure that it worked. And so is it valuable work? Yeah, for the right person, it's definitely important work that needs to be done. We knew it would be painful for us, and because of that, likely the potential client as well, if we had moved forward with that. So that was a piece of work we ultimately passed on.
And I think that was the right decision.
For everybody.
Yeah.
We had a similar situation in the last few months where a client had reached out I was on the phone with one of my coach trainers, and the client was asking us to do something that was highly customized and really tailored for their particular environment, and really, really interesting work. But it was a bit out of my comfort zone, and they were asking us to take on a new assessment, that they wanted us to use their particular assessment tool, which wasn't in our books. We didn't have that, so we are gonna have to learn their assessment tool and then tailor the coaching and training for them. And then they wanted us to do that at a nonprofit rate that was really unreasonable for what they were asking for us, because we were going to have to do a ton of learning and a ton of research and a ton of prep to get ready for the kind of experience that we would usually do. And then they were going to have us do this to a very large group in a very short way without a lot of interaction, and, like a once and done training without coaching to follow. So really once and done training, which isn't our preference anyway, and highly customized, and a lot of things at a very small dollar. And so as we're listening to it, I'm like, there is a thing here, and I see there is a thing here, but I just don't think that we're the right solution. And let me tell you why. Here's what we do, and here's the kind of training that we offer, and here's the tool set that we have. And when we do training and coaching, we pair it with this coaching so that it's a small nugget rather than a full day. It's a nugget here, and then we supplement it with coaching, and we help people grow in their skills in this way. But I really don't think that what you're asking for is the right fit for us. It doesn't match what we do, because we try this smaller group, smaller interval, customized thing. And she listened, and as we're having this conversation, that it's just not the right fit, she said, oh, I understand better what you're saying. Oh, no, this is not the right fit for you. So let's stop talking about this, because I have this other opportunity over here that is the right fit for you. Let's stop talking about this, shift gears. And then we shifted the conversation entirely to something that was absolutely the right fit.
Isn't it funny how often that actually happens, that there is another thing? And I think that's where, taking the time to really reflect, if you're a consultant or a sole proprietor, on your values for your business, but also your personal values, and whether or not that's a thing you want to say yes to.
Yeah, well, everything that you say yes to is a no to something else, because your schedule is infinite. You don't have the capacity to say yes to everything. So everything that we say yes to might mean that we have to say no to other work that is a perfect fit for us, but that happens to come in the door a little bit later. And so we have found that any of the times that we have said no, or we're not the right fit for you, inevitably in the door comes work that is perfectly suited for us, is fully aligned with our values. There are clients that we treasure and continue to do work for long after the initial engagement, because we were willing to hold out for that.
Yep. And it's actually, Jodi, your being willing to hold to that is one of the very first things that I prized about you from our earliest days. You have never let that go. And I don't use words like always and never, they're dangerous words, but from the very, very beginning of knowing you, from our friendship back in the earliest days, you have been faithful to that value of, nope, if I say yes to this, I'm saying no to something else. And I'm not willing to sacrifice the something else for this thing that's not quite right. And I just treasure that about you.
Well, you were the first person to ever tell me that no was my superpower. And at the beginning, I was offended by that. But honestly, I have come to cherish, your designation of that, because honestly, I believe that does just open up the yeses for all of the things that you are truly passionate about in your heart and can't imagine your life without.
I think, these last couple stories to start to flirt with the fourth reason that values are really important. And it's really how you show up.
Right. So it does show up in how we pitch business. So our proposals are really tailored to the opportunity, an important piece, because it's really that flexible and practical piece of our values. So that's important. I think another example for us is strategic planning. Now, we have known a lot of strategy consultants, and we're certainly happy you're not one of them, Sinikka, that will march in with an inflexible methodology, a ton of rigor that is appropriate to an organization of 5,000 employees, and try to shove it down the throats of folks that are smaller, who may not have ever done any sort of planning, operational or strategic. And I think it's really important for us that we tailor that experience to really where they're at, basics that will stand in the way of their big growth dreams. And
And that speaks so highly to your flexibility, right? You are flexible. You do what needs to be done to address the problem. And I treasure that about you. And Andy, that was one of the early things that I recognized about you, is that when you were faced with a situation, you were not so dead set on A as the solution that you couldn't see that there was a Q that needed to be fixed before you could get to A, the solution. Your flexibility, and that, well, we could try this thing, we could do a little bit of this, we could pull, like, we worked together on a sprint, a methodology that was a hybrid of a little of this and a little, we were kind of doing a RUP agile kind of iterative, make it up as we go kind of thing, in a place where we weren't allowed to call it RUP, we weren't allowed to call it agile, we weren't allowed to call it anything, because we were just innovating, and we weren't even in a technology space doing this thing that we were doing. And you're like, well, sure, we'll just flex a little, we'll adapt. And you took it in stride. And I remember appreciating that flexibility, that willingness to just try it so very much.
And that you can imagine then, based on that experience and your experiences working with Jodi too, where, a larger organization that might have a preferred approach or methodology probably isn't the best fit for us, right? Because what really lights us up is taking from all of the different things that we've worked on and building something that really works for an organization. The thing that makes me saddest related to strategic planning is when we walk in and ask to see what they've done before and they're embarrassed to pull it out. This isn't working for you, is what that says. Like, you shouldn't be embarrassed to get this out. It was too much, or it wasn't the right approach, and let's fix that.
I love that. I love that. So in your case, the values that you've adopted have made it so that when you go and deliver the services that you deliver, your brand says, I am not going to leave this thing behind until everyone around me is fully satisfied. And so all of the core values that we've established have made it so that we'll leave behind something that really is useful, and that we'll adapt as we need to make sure that you're happy and that you're satisfied. And we'll bring all of these values to bear so that you are satisfied as a customer.
And the really interesting thing, Sinikka, is because they aren't aspirational, we don't have to dig out our value sheet to know that we're doing that. We would feel badly leaving without having done that scoping work to make it a practical thing for them. We don't need to look back at that. And I think that to me is the most important thing about values work, is that, you should be able to have conversation about it on the fly. If people need prep time, it's likely you didn't have the right values quite dialed in yet. So the red flag for me is when I see innovation as a value, I'm usually like, uh-oh. Because if you have to say it and you're telling your team that, you probably aren't very innovative to begin with. So I think it's important to have them be really true to who you already are.
I love it. I love it. Thank you. So as we're bringing this conversation to an end here, which has been a really, really delightful conversation on reasons values are fundamental to your success. Clearly, they've helped you in your years here growing your business. A tricky time to start growing a business, but clearly you're flourishing and just doing wonderful things. As we're kind of wrapping that up, this wouldn't be the Even Better podcast if I didn't ask, what's making you even better these days?
I think for me, it is increasing comfort around taking risks. I was a fairly risk-averse person as a younger person, and the more that I've just taken a leap of faith here and there and seen wonderful and magical things happen as a result, and not every risk pans out in the way that I envisioned it, but all of them kind of create this great tapestry or fabric of just knowing that that's okay, and knowing that I can just take a risk and it's okay, whether I, land in a crumpled heap on the sidewalk, or if it helps us grow, this business, it's fantastic either way.
Love it. How about you, Andy?
I think being discovering and then our niche, because and you might relate to this, Sinikka, knowing your career path, we've done a little bit of a lot. And so the kind of work we can engage with an organization and add value is pretty broad. So really discovering where we lie at.
Love it. Love it. So if people wanted to find you, Canary Consulting Group is where they can go. Best place to reach you, best way to connect with you. If they wanted, of course, they've reached out to us. We'll connect them with you, but best way to reach you, Andy and Jodi?
You can reach us via our website, which is canaryconsultinggroup.com. There's a little form you can fill out on there, or we have our contact information if you prefer to get in touch with us directly. And we'd love to hear from you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time today. What a joy to spend time with good friends with sage counsel. What a joy. Thank you.
You bet.
Thank you.
And to our listeners, thanks for joining in. If you missed any portion of this, go back to the beginning because there's great stuff in here. And on behalf of all of us at Your Clear Next Step, thanks for listening. And we hope the rest of your day is even better.
Thank you for tuning in today. The Even Better podcast will be back with more content soon. But in the meantime, subscribe to our podcast or check out our website at yourclearnextstep.com for more information. See you next episode.